This is KCR, the sound of state.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Mainstage Mavericks on KCR College Radio, the sound of state. I just want to say Happy Memorial Day in remembrance to the heroes who fell serving our country and all our armed forces across the world. I have two very special guests with me today. Christopher Torborg from last week is back.
Hello, good to be back. Thank you so much, Phillip.
Of course, we're honored to have you back, Chris. And we have our special guest today, Amanda Schaar, Executive Director of New Fortune Theater Company. Prior to co-founding New Fortune, she proudly served as the founding artistic director of the youth nonprofit Into Theater. She was the director of educational outreach for Southwest Shakespeare Company, production manager for Child's Play, touring theater. Yeah, she's done a lot. She's a Craig Noll nominee, accomplished writer, dancer, musician, and actress. She's appeared in experimental shows, classical venues across the country. Credits include New Fortune's Henry V, Birthday Party, Les Liaisons d'un Russe, Poor Players, Measure for Measure, and Richard II. Yeah, the list goes on. There's a huge, oh, you performed at Northwestern, too?
Mm-hmm.
Really? Did you go to Northwestern?
No, but we knew a professor there who
Okay.
invited us in for a reading.
That's really cool.
Thanks for the amazing intro.
Oh, I tried. I made that myself, actually.
You're so thorough.
Yeah, not introducing you, but the other intro. I think you were talking about the intro to you, though.
Oh,
Yeah. That too. Both. I was trying my best, and so you and Chris have known each other for what, a year?
2 years.
2
now.
years?
Mm-hmm.
We met at the auditions for Les Liaisons, which was the first show that I did with New Fortune, and where I met her and Richard, and that was in August.
I guess it would have been
Yeah.
in 2016.
In 2016, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Chris,
So
tell me
coming up on 2 years.
Tell me about your audition for
Oh
that
God,
show.
I was terrified.
Oh, he was amazing.
That was the scariest audition I've ever had in my life, because you had mentioned the Henry V show, and that was the first show that I saw Amanda and Richard in. It's a funny story about that show, me seeing that show. I didn't know anything about New Fortune. I was looking up a show to go see that night, and I saw Henry V, and I went down there, and I was like, do you have any student price tickets or anything like that? And they said, no, we don't tonight, just because it's our opening night, but if you stand aside, we'll see what we can do. I didn't know it was opening night, and I'm standing there, and these bagpipers come by and start playing a song.
The Cameron Highlanders.
And then about 5 minutes before the show, someone comes up and is like, hey, just come inside. We'll sit you. Come in. And they sat me in the front row, and I couldn't believe that performance. It blew me away. It had such a big impact on me. And I was a fan of Amanda and Richard and New Fortune ever since. And from there, that audition, I was terrified, because I really admired these people in this company and the work they did, and I wanted so badly to be a part of them.
You walked into the audition room, and Richard was there. Amanda was there too.
Amanda was there.
Yeah,
And
he told you that you were actually too young for any of the roles, right?
He told me that later when he
said
called
that
me on
later.
the phone.
Okay.
Yeah. But they, I did my 2 pieces, and then they gave me a few things to read.
Mm-hmm.
So I went off and then worked on it for a little bit, and then I came back and did it.
Gotcha.
And aside from my own nerves, it was a great experience. They were so generous and gracious, and that's really the pinnacle of what I wish every audition could be like. It's the best audition experience I ever had.
So Amanda, we like Chris then.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
It was an incredible audition, though. It really was. I mean, he did 2 totally different pieces. And when we gave him the sides, he came back in about 10 minutes later, off book.
Wow.
Crazy. We said, have a seat, Chris. Let's talk.
That is really cool.
Yeah, and we've been hanging out and making art ever since.
yeah.
What was the rehearsal process like for both of you?
It's going to be very different for both of us, because I had a much
It
smaller
is.
role than Amanda, so I wasn't there as often. But the every time I was there, the room was great, because there was just so much creativity flowing from everywhere. And Richard, as a director, he creates a room where you can say what you feel about something. In particular, he had given me this moment. It's now become infamous among our circle of friends. It's
Is it
the
the
tray
tray?
moment.
Yes.
It's the tray. So he had, when he had offered the role to me, he said that we were going to create a lot of little moments to really give this servant character a character and make him a person.
This
and a
was
part
the character
of this
you
world.
played.
Right. And one of those moments was a scene where I come in to deliver something on a tray, and as I'm walking out, I get distracted by one of the women, and I drop the tray and have to pick it up and leave all awkwardly. Which in those days would have meant I was getting my head cut off, basically. And so we're trying to figure out this little moment, and sometimes it's not funny enough. Sometimes it's too funny. It's too over the top. It's distracting. And I bring that up because it was really a room where I could say, you know what, we did that and it didn't feel right. Can we try it like this? Can I try this? Can I go home and think about it and we'll try it again tomorrow? So it was a really great process as an artist, you know, because you get to really let your creative juices flow and you feel like you are a part of this whole process more than just being an actor.
You had this room to play around and experiment. Even with such a small role, you're able to give it life.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I can't tell you how many moments, little moments even, from that big tray moment to even just little subtle moments like this intermission transition where I come out to light a candle and then I secretly take a drink of wine or brandy when nobody's looking, and maybe half the audience that didn't get up to go to the restroom or get something to drink during the intermission saw it. But it's the little things like that really make you feel like you're part of this world.
It keeps the story in the air.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Mm-hmm. The San Diego Theater Critics Circle is a very, very great thing. It is. I was looking for a blurb and I couldn't find it, but it's honoring the professional theater within the San Diego theater community. And Amanda was nominated this last year for her role in Liaison, and it was I saw the show with my girlfriend a year ago, and we loved the show. It was crazy because, like, you know, I had seen the movie Cruel Intentions, right? Which was based on a Liaison, like loosely based, but like watching the play, I was just like, oh my gosh, this was crazy, and this was written in the 1800s, and this was like this was so controversial when it came out, and you know, and I remember watching your character, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is such a great performance, and like I love the way you interacted with the other characters, especially with you know, Richard was Valmont, right? Yeah. And so what was that like for you?
Thank you. It was it surprised me what the process was as Torvel. If you know the story, is the very dedicated woman who, yes, is never going to betray her husband ever, very religious. And I thought there's no one who's going to take issue with this character. But since Trump had just been elected, this is January of 2017, it was surprising, I think, within the rehearsal room and through performance, what people thought about a good woman who would, in their eyes, I think, roll over for this scoundrel, womanizer, you know, how dare she? And that people would laugh at her collapse and demise. And I thought, it's such a beautiful, melodramatic story. I mean, she goes off to die in a convent of a broken heart. So how much issue
can't get more French
can you
than that.
take with her? Exactly. No, but some people were really angry, and some people were really concerned about how we would portray that.
Totally.
Which it surprised me. There's another theater that we're friends with up in LA called Antaeus Theater Company. Very, very professional, and they produced Liaison shortly after us, and they experienced the same thing, which I thought is just fascinating what society will do to the way we look at a story.
I definitely feel like, you know, depending on the times and with passing years and the way, you know, different expectations change, you know, there are certain stories like movies, plays, you know, books you read where these characters that you thought were so great, you read them and you think, oh wow, like they're such jerks, or like, you know, why is this character, you know, letting themselves, you know, be influenced by this character, and you know, why won't they stand up for something? And so it's interesting how a lot of stories, you know, kind of there's all these little things, you know. Like I remember I watched The Graduate. Have you seen The Graduate?
Oh yeah,
sure.
That's one of my favorite films.
Yeah, you watch The Graduate. You watch The Graduate, and there's a lot of parts of that movie that are super outdated, you know, like super outdated, but also in the way too how it treats like Benjamin Braddock, Dustin Hoffman's character, the way he treats Mrs. Robinson's daughter, you know. It's just kind of like, you know, you laughed at that back then, but today it was just kind of like, oh, why is he doing that? You know, it's just like, you know, there's certain things that, you know, kind of stay the same, but other things that change, and you're like, oh wow, this is crazy to watch it from a, like, you know, today's point of view.
Right. So we've talked about the audience reaction, but what was your reaction creating that character, bringing that character to life from the novel?
She's
through the month and a half that we had before.
She's an interesting challenge to track through because she goes from being this very staid woman into someone who's having an epileptic fit because she cares so deeply and can't show it. So like you say, I think we're lucky to have such an open room to work in. I remember the final scene that we have, which is, I think, scene 15, when he comes to break it off with her. And Richard and I, because we'd been producing it as well, had been so stressed out about it, that we said, we can't do this today. Like, I just can't put myself through this today.
Sure, and if you'll let me jump in for a second, that's another part to add to the stress of creating such an important and emotional character. How long had you been working on this show in preparation to even getting in the rehearsal room? Let's say even in preparation to having the auditions?
Yeah, a year before we even had auditions, because New Fortune is a grassroots theater company, so most donations we get are in like $5 or $10 at a time. We don't have a big donor, and so it was an over $40,000 show to produce, so that took a lot of time and when you don't really have a marketing budget, trying to hit the ground running and what favors can I do in advance and trying to think of a creative solution to every problem to get it up on its feet.
Renting at the Lyceum Theater it's not cheap. No.
No, but they do have a service. The Horton Plaza Theater Foundation is in place, and I would recommend it if anyone's ever thinking of booking in there. If you're a nonprofit registered, then they can offset some of the cost of it. But yeah, it is expensive.
So back to the rehearsal room, you and Richard have been producing this show, and you're concerned about the scene. You're stressed out about it.
Oh, yes, yes. So we finally got to this scene where, she's going to haul off and slap him, and she's going to throw her down on the chaise lounge and abandon her. And we finally said, let's just do it. We're just going to do it now. And it felt so good. It was so easy. We're like, let's do it again. We're both in tears. We're like, let's go. It was so much fun. And I feel like that's the way with a lot of projects that I've ever done. Tell me if you feel the same, but I feel like there's something that's like really hard that you're not looking forward to doing, and then it's your favorite.
Totally. There was there was this show I did. We were just talking about it before the show started. My Mother's in the Audience.
Oh, yes.
Directed by Jason Matty, written by Jacob Surofsky. In that show, I had to go through a lot of physical things. I was jumping around on the stage. I had many moments where I was just feeling so exhausted, backstage. And I was just like, I don't want to do this again. Like, every single night, I'm having to just go out there and, just jump around. And, also, I didn't know this at the time, but I learned this, 2 months after the show closed. But I had, a torn meniscus at this time, in my knee. And so I was in so much pain, and I just kept thinking, oh my gosh, why is my knee cramping up all the time? This is ridiculous. And so I remember just going, being backstage and thinking, I'm not gonna be able to do this tonight, it's not gonna happen. But I would still go out and I'd do it and it'd be fine. And it was fun. It was always fun, but I was always dreading it in the back of my mind until I'd actually go out and do it. And I feel like, there's always that really, really, Chris, what about you? There's always that hard part in a show that you're not looking forward to, but you do it. And then, yeah.
We were talking last week about that Baroon speech in the middle of Love Labor's Lost. That I had been so freaked out about because Ray Chambers and I had been going back and forth.
Christopher was in a production of Love's Labor's Lost at the Old Glow Summer Shakespeare Intensive.
Yeah. And then when we finally got to the performance and it got to that point, we went out and did it. And the audience had such a great reaction to it, and that moment worked really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was backstage. I was watching the monitors. Yeah. Well, that's what I admire about you too, because you throw yourself into these projects. Within for the Old Globe, you threw yourself completely in the role of Baroon. For you and Liaison, you completely mastered the role that seriously, I was watching you. It wasn't just because I know you so well, but I was so genuinely entertained anytime you'd come on stage and you had, because I remember those looks that you were giving to to the female characters and the way that you were just you feared for your life. You're oh no, I'm gonna get beheaded for this, and Belmont's gonna get me. And so I really liked that.
Well, thank you.
Because
and I'm glad to hear it's not just because you're my friend, because if I did an awful job, I'd want you to tell me.
No, you didn't at all. And it's the cliche is there's no there's no small parts, only small actors.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
but it's true.
No,
it's just
even,
like
I consider that whole that show is one of my favorite shows I've ever done.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's true. And if you can have a fantastic performer in the smallest role, then your show is going to be superb in a way that it's not going to be otherwise. I
No,
think.
of course, because I've seen this happen a lot in town. Is that the company gets a little too overconfident, and they say, "Oh, this person that just walks on and says 2 lines, we can give that to whoever, whatever, it doesn't matter." And then you get somebody that comes out and just completely destroys the universe, the world that they've created, and takes you out of it with just a terrible performance because they gave it to like somebody's brother.
Right.
Basically, that's never been in a show before.
Well, it's unfair to them, too. If you're going to set them up in a place where they're going to fail, then
Yeah.
that's too bad.
Yeah. Talent is in the choices as well. You got to make sure, whoever's...
Who's that quote from?
Robert De Niro.
Robert De Niro.
Yeah, I think I said that last week, too.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, I'm just using the
That's
same
gonna
material.
be the motto here at Mainstage
Talent
Mavericks.
is in the choices. Mainstage Mavericks.
We
every
actually
Monday.
said that. Robert De Niro copied that from us.
Truly. Amanda, I wanted to ask, where are you from?
I'm from Phoenix, and we came here from Chicago.
Awesome.
We're both Arizona kids.
You went to where'd you go to school?
Arizona State.
Arizona State. But you hold a BA in theater from Herberger College of Fine Arts.
That's their theater school.
Oh, that's the theater
Herberger
school.
Yeah.
Thanks for clarifying that for me. I was like, whoa. Do you know you have another degree as well?
In my sleep. Yes.
The website does not lie. Yeah, I'm getting all this information from the New Fortune Theater Company website. You should check it out. What can they check out here on this website?
Well, right now, you can peruse our full press history, and you can read a Pinter blog that's pretty cool. And we were working on Harold Pinter's The Birthday Party, and a lot of pictures. There's a lot of reference materials on there. We're still waiting to book our next production. We're waiting for space to become available.
Which is always the hardest part, I feel, of putting up any production is just
Finding
finding a
space.
place
and
to
in
do it.
San Diego, I mean, shout out to all the young theaters in town, like Backyard Renaissance and Roustabouts, and it's fantastic, but it's made space a premium, because right now every theater that's here has a resident, except
Truly.
for 10th Ave.
That's right. Yeah. 10th Avenue. I had a show that I put up there,
Nice.
but it was through the San Diego International Fringe Festival, but 2 years ago. But I'd never been in the 10th Avenue before. But I walked in and I was like, oh my
Yeah,
gosh,
it's a
this
cool
place,
place.
and
That's-
it's
It is.
haunted too. Did you know
which
that?
always makes it
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little girl ghost, isn't it? That's on
Yeah.
the stairs.
makes it so much more artistic.
Yeah, on the second
That's
floor.
where we had our rehearsals for liaisons.
Yeah.
So Amanda, do you want to tell us a little bit more about the history of New Fortune and maybe speak of Birthday Party, which you just mentioned, and Henry V?
Gladly. So we started New Fortune in 2014. It was Poor Players Forever. Poor Players was one that Richard Baird, who's my partner in life and in theater, used to run, and they did garage band Shakespeare is what they called it. So it was very anachronistic, very young, very edgy Shakespeare, and
He
very
had it for
found
years,
spaces.
right?
Oh, for years
Yeah.
and years. And
Since he was right out of high school, even,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
he, like Chris, I believe, started going to school for a bit and decided, I really want to put this into practice. And so he formed Poor Players, and made a good go of it. And people got older, and it kind of drifted apart a little bit. And when we all found ourselves in San Diego again, we thought, let's pick it up again, but let's rebrand it, because nobody wanted to give money to Poor Players because they like them like Poor Players. So we said,
Yeah.
we'll call it New Fortune. And New Fortune is also from the Fortune Playhouse from Shakespeare's time. Like Poor Player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage. Of course. So
Hey.
very Shakespeare.
That's really cool.
And that's what we ended up booking. The space that we could find was Ion, or Sixth at Penn in Hillcrest. And when we saw that space and how darling and how small it is, thank you, Ion, we thought, let's do Henry V, because it's meant to be done in this tiny space, and we don't have the resources for this.
And I feel like the fact that it was in a tiny space, it must have been so cool for the audience, to be so close to, like,
As an audience member at that performance, I could say that it definitely was.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And
like-
we had Matt Scott Wood on the sound effects there and like shaking that place with the because it was set modern as well. Planes
Speaking of
overhead.
Matt, also received a Craig Knoll nomination for his work on Liaisons.
Ooh.
He did. I think he did for Henry V too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. He's all right.
Such a great cast. You had Richard Baird, John Tessmer, Matt Thompson was in it.
Yeah.
You had who else was in it?
Henderson.
Matt Henderson, who's from LA, and he co-directed. Jessica John.
Oh yeah, Jessica John. I just saw her in Noises Off.
Yeah.
She was great.
She's
Such a funny show.
good in farce, isn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who else? Rachel Van Wormer was in it.
Oh, I know Rachel. Yeah. She and Brian Mackey are married, right?
They are.
Yeah. Crazy. Everyone's just small community, in San Diego. Just everyone just knows each other. It's cool.
Yeah.
It's really cool. Isn't it cool, Chris?
Totally. So yeah, New Fortune was sort of inaugurated with Henry V, and then
Yes.
Birthday Party came next.
Birthday Party came next. Richard is a huge fan of Pinter, and he really convinced me onto. I know he's after you, Chris, to read more Pinter.
Oh
isn't
yeah.
he? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Because I was a Sam Beckett girl all the way. But Birthday Party we were looking at, and Richard looked up one day and said, "We know the cast for this. If we could do this so beautifully. Let's see if everyone's available." and they were, and so that one came around really serendipitously.
And what was your role on that whole project?
Lulu? Yeah, well, I was executive director as well. But yeah, Lulu is the girl next door who may or may not have been taken advantage of. But it's Pinter, so it's sort of as you remember it, so it happened. Cool lights on that show. I love that one. I
Did
would
you
have
see
run
that
it
show,
forever.
Chris?
I didn't.
Oh, you didn't?
I'm not sure what I was doing, but I'll kick myself always for missing that one.
Yeah, that was a good one. It
Where'd you
was
put it up?
at the Moxie Space.
Oh, cool.
Who were fabulous to work with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had, through my class, I did this little playwrights festival that was at Moxie. And so we got to have these pieces we had written performed at Moxie on this one night. And it's a really cool space. And it's another space, too. Is it bigger than the Ion space?
It is. It's a long stage.
Yeah, it's a
and
long stage.
They actually took seats out right before we moved in to make it a 99-seater. I think
Okay.
it was modeled after the North Coast Repertory Theater.
Hmm.
In fact, because it was Sean that went from North Coast and built the Moxie Space for Signet before they moved to Old Town. So, yeah.
That's really cool.
So speaking of playwriting, Amanda, would you like to tell us a little bit about what you're working on right now?
Yes, but there's projects. Do you mean Patreon or do you mean...
Well, we'll start with the playwriting project.
Okay. Oh, you mean
The
Playwrights
Playwrights
Project?
Project, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so I am really lucky to be a part of Playwrights Project, and they've been around since I think it's 1985. And you know a thing or two about it, Phil.
Oh, I know
Yes.
Playwrights Project. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love what Playwrights Project stands for, and I love, because I don't know, nobody I know personally has gotten a show put up there, because is it like what, 12 to 18? Is that their bracket, or?
I think it must not be, though. When I got there, it just so happened that they'd scheduled a lot of elementary school classes.
Okay.
And they usually do just high school. And when I walked in, I used to work with elementary schoolers in Chicago teaching story. It's slightly different, but still storytelling. And they said, "Do you want to take them?" And I said, "Yeah, I love working with elementary schoolers." But they let me create a different curriculum for them because high schoolers would write the plays themselves.
Yeah.
And the first group I had were first graders, and they can think real fast, but they're having a hard time writing and spelling. So we wrote it all together as a class, and we had lots of characters rather than 4.
That's really cool.
They did a really good job.
Yeah, I think you were telling me that the stories they would come up with would get real dark real quick.
Yes.
The high schoolers or the elementary school kids?
The elementary schoolers.
Real fast. Because, we say, there's an intangible want right at the core of the conflict. What could it be? First one's love. Next is revenge. Always revenge. and depending if, who's in the class, which way that sways. But no, I was telling you, Chris, there was one class that I was worried about. Oh, this is a little chaotic in here. It's like, they're so little, they weren't being really diplomatic in their brainstorming. And it was just a lot of explosions. And in the end, this little girl goes, just please, I think what we're trying for is just it doesn't always have to be a happy ending. Sometimes there are problems that heroes can't deal with. Sometimes they're not going to win, and they just really wanted a story that
Some
didn't have like a
incredible
happy
insight
moral.
for a
And
first grader.
the story they came up with in the end was basically Dr. Strangelove, just if Russia was a puppy with laser eyes. So
The Kubrick film we all wished for.
I was impressed.
It's crazy, like with some of my writing, because the last two plays I've written, right? They both had pretty bittersweet endings. You know, they just kind of they ended on kind of like an note.
Yeah.
It was a little sad, but it was like there was still hope, you know, for these characters. And I think back to what you were saying with, like, you know, the whole, like, you know, not every story has to have a happy ending. A lot of plays, and, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of stories and plays and everything from, you know, Europe and outside of the United States, they mostly, like, don't have happy endings for a lot of these stories. Like a lot of classic fairy tales don't necessarily have happy endings, as like you might know.
Most of them are
The
horrific.
originals are all terrible.
Brothers
Everybody
Grimm,
dies.
yeah.
Everybody dies. It's not your Disney version.
One of them too.
No, truly not. And so, you know, it's interesting because, like, I remember there's this one critic who was like, you know, it was like a John le Carre novel, right? You know, the spy thriller, and he wrote some novel. I don't remember what it was called, but he wrote some novel, and it had like a completely unhappy ending. And some critic was like, no, it had to have a happy ending for it to have worked, because the whole time, you know, it doesn't make any sense. And so, what do you think about that, Chris? Like,
I think that's very naive.
yeah,
And I really appreciate that elementary schooler's point of view on where theater should go. I would love to see more theater and film and television that where the good guy doesn't always win.
yeah.
Because that's not life. That's not realistic.
It's not. No, there's gonna be failures, and there's gonna be things that you can't solve in like a 30-minute sitcom.
No, of course.
Yeah.
And speaking of the bittersweet endings, Amanda has a play that she's written called Kill Sophocles that I believe has a pretty bittersweet ending.
Socrates, yeah.
Did I say Sophocles?
He was in Sophocles, yeah.
Kill Socrates,
Socrates.
my bad.
No, yeah. Well, Socrates must die, so...
Would you like to tell us a little bit about Kill Socrates and its history and
I'd
how
love
you
to
came
hear
up
it.
with the idea for it and your process of writing it?
Would I? So Kill Socrates is based on the trial and death of Socrates by Plato. And Plato wrote that in a dialogue, like a play. And Socrates himself was supposed to have said that he really loved theater, but he didn't like the written word. He thought that took the life out of it, but performing it somehow breathed life back into it again. And so I thought, people do readings of this. Like, there are philosopher nerds out there who are daring enough to get on stage and like do a reading of the dialogue that's just really roughly translated from the Greek. But man, Socrates is hilarious and a soulful figure.
Oh, he is. And in your play, you really get to the heart of both of those. Because my reading of it, he has so many lines that at first glance you read them as, oh, that's really funny. This old man, you know, bumbling around and saying these kind of funny things, and then you think about him for a minute and you say, wait a minute, that's really sad.
It's sad.
It brings a tear to your eye.
Scared.
Absolutely.
He's scared, but he knows what's right, and he knows what he thinks is right. And it is true. I wrestled with that, but this is a man who literally talked himself to death. Like, he wouldn't stop. Because basically what happened was that God told him, "You're the wisest man," and he didn't think that could be true. So he went around asking everybody what they knew, and they all thought that they knew a lot. And Socrates' deal, of course, is that, you know, I don't know anything. I only know that I know nothing. And so I'm better than you for thinking that, than thinking I know something if I don't actually know something. So he went around basically and told everyone in Greece that they were an idiot, and they killed him.
Yeah, that's a good way to make a lot of enemies.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hold it right there. We're gonna do a little ad reading, and we'll be back on Mainstage Mavericks with Christopher Torborg and Amanda Schaar. Head to newcenter.sdsu.edu/events to see many of the awesome events and opportunities available to SDSU students. Find events such as leadership workshops, movie nights, sports games, and career fairs. There is plenty to get involved in, so check out newcenter.sdsu.edu/events today. Chris is going to read an ad. The one below it.
Make sure to follow KCR on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at KCR College Radio for weekly news and sports updates, as well as the latest giveaway opportunities.
And we're back. Amanda, tell us more about this play or the next. What are some other things you've written?
Oh, Amanda's written so much. We were talking about Kill Socrates.
Chris knows Amanda a little better than I do.
Amanda has so much more than that. She's written plays, poems, short stories, novels, radio dramas, everything, and she's really got a very unique style that is she's made entirely her own.
You've written radio
Thanks.
dramas?
Yeah, for fun more.
For fun?
Yeah,
That
for
sounds
fun.
cool.
Yeah, it is. Everyone should try it.
Yeah.
And Amanda, as a writer, I think that the areas you like to focus on most, you like philosophical work, you like absurdist work, you like a lot of humor, you like to inject humor into a lot of things, which makes your philosophy really interesting, which is what you're working on right now on your Patreon, which you can feel free to plug here.
Thank
as well.
you. Yes, www.patreon.com/AJ Schaar. No, I'm calling it the home for lost figments of imagination, because, like Chris says, and thank you very much for the kind words. It's I've got an obsession with infinity, basically, and I've got a theory about putting that into anything artistic, and that is that if the heavier or headier a subject is, I think the more comic or action-driven it should be. Otherwise, it's just there. So that's like the first play I wrote was Rummy Starker Love Fest, which was an existential sketch comedy where like fairies would be literally trapped by semantics or things like that. And so that is a lot of what the work that I do is, and I'm very fortunate. Thank you for my audience base, who have been very underground and very enthusiastic. But a lot of the stuff I do is stuff that it's not going to make it in mainstream publishing. In fact, I've gone through the circuit, and they're as kind as can be. They always love it. It doesn't look like anything else. I don't know how to market this.
Totally.
Yeah, but because there is still an audience for it, I've found a couple friends on Patreon.com, and I'd really recommend it for anyone who, like you, does something on a regular basis, who writes or creates shows on a regular basis, as a way for friends and family and fans to come on board and support you for $1 a month. And every month you'll be sending them your content, and some exclusively. So your show every week, say. But I'm hoping that it really takes off, because the home for lost figments, this idea is that these figments of imagination need a home, and I need money, so.
Don't we all? Don't all of us artists? But that home for lost figments is I see a very big correlation to that in your novel Storybook Coroner, where the all of the fictional characters from novels and short stories and fairy tales that have been killed need a place to go.
Definitely. A Storybook Coroner is the basis. It's like the base subscription that you can get through Patreon. But it asks the question, where do storybook characters go when we die? When they die,
It's like an Island of Misfit Toys kind of thing.
Kind of. The idea is, like, we created them, right? Mm-hmm. And then we killed them horribly, probably. And we should have some responsibility for where they went, but we don't have anything planned for them. Mm-hmm. So the argument is kind of like, well, what did God, if God exists, have planned for us? Maybe they're just writing stories and it's arbitrary. Possibly.
And a lot of these stories, you mentioned Samuel Beckett, right, earlier. And so is he your favorite playwright?
Definitely one of them.
Definitely one of them?
Was my favorite for a long time. But I love Shakespeare and I love Schaar and so many. Yeah. Classical, though, is where I tend to go, though. I love, like, Jess Butterworth these days, things like that.
Chris hates classical.
Right.
Oh, he loathes
Can't
it.
stand it.
Chris, you own many first editions of classical novels, don't you?
I do. I have not many. I have a small collection of
Several
first editions. It's about 15 or 20.
It's a good amount.
They're beautiful.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's one of my little hobbies.
Yeah, because like you're a big Shakespeare aficionado, and
absolutely.
I know that you take a lot of issue with many Shakespeare productions that you've seen. I'm not going to name names, but like you've seen productions where
absolutely, and that's why I again, that's another reason why I was so excited and thrilled and appreciative to finally get a chance to work with Amanda and Richard and the New Fortune group, because I think that their thoughts on how Shakespeare should be performed really aligns with my thoughts. And when I had met them, I had graduated from high school about a year ago, and I had just left Grossmont for the same reason you mentioned.
Grossmont Community College.
Grossmont Community College. For the same reason you mentioned Richard stopped going to school, is because I felt like I was very frustrated in my classes. I felt
and
like
Richard went to Grossmont too, right?
He did, yeah. So that was another thing. We both knew Jerry Hager. We'd both worked with him. Coach
Jerry Hager.
Is that I felt frustrated in my classes. I felt like I wasn't learning anything that I really needed to. I wasn't getting a chance to really put my skills into practice. And then that's why seeing this Henry V really blew my mind, because at that point I had been forming all of these ideas on what Shakespeare is and how it needs to be performed. And I saw this performance and I said, finally, here it is. Finally. So I really appreciate their thought process on that and how they handle the material and how they present it.
How do you present cuts in your Shakespeare shows?
That you'll have to ask Richard when he comes by, because he really
he's the man behind the text and all of that.
He is,
Yeah.
and like Chris said, I'm a really big fan of his aesthetic, or I don't think New Fortune would have gone as far if he didn't approach it the way he does, because he trusts in intelligent audiences and actors, and puts the story and text first. And if you do that, then I think a lot of text cuts present themselves. But he's the one who does that. I think it's rare when you're in the rehearsal with him where he goes, "Do we need that?"
Yeah.
He's usually thought his way through it.
Is it interesting being directed by someone you're so close to?
It's fantastic.
It's
actually.
fantastic?
Yeah. Especially because he often acts in what he's directing in the
Yes.
shows that we've done. But no, when you have so much trust with somebody, it's like we've got a shorthand. And if we're in scenes together, it's never like, is it okay if I do this? Would you be all right if I tried that? Because he knows and I know that it would be fine. And so it moves faster.
That's really cool. And like if he offers you criticism, it just kind of is that it's not bad. It's just like, okay, yeah, it's just kind of like
Anthony Schaar and Gregory Dorn, Richard always talks to me about. They wrote a book. They're together, and they're South African, I suppose, actor-director team. And they used to have discussions at home, and once, I guess, all of the dishes that they owned ended up at the bottom of the pool. And he's like, let's not be like that.
So luckily you don't have a pool.
Yeah.
Which actually is an interesting question. Do you and Richard ever work on scenes at home, or is it a strictly once we enter the door, this is not here?
No, we talk about it, but we don't usually rehearse at home. Though when he was directing Mice and Men, I did get to pretend to be Lenny for a bit, so he could pretend to be Curly while he staged the fight. He's like, just stand there.
That's really cool.
For sure.
Richard Baer directed Mice and Men at North Coast Repertory Theater last fall, which is an amazing production.
Oh, absolabsolely.
Oh,
Yes.
that was a special one, I thought.
Going back to about directing, people you're close with, because I've directed, I've directed people I was very close with in my shows, and it's always just such a strange dynamic. Because I think it's also due to the fact that I'm so young, and so like in a lot of ways, like going from like because like 2 years ago, like I was in high school and I was directing my friends in the show, and I had to get on them for missing rehearsals, and there was moments when they were being immature, and so I had to get on them on that, and it was weird because at the same time it's like, oh, they're your friends, but like you gotta assert yourself, like, I'm the director, I gotta make sure like this show is gonna be delivered on time and that everything's going according to plan, and so it's something I'm still trying to figure out, but clearly Richard Baird and the folks at New Fortune Theater Company have got it figured out, so I look up to them for that.
We work on it.
So you and Richard lived in Chicago for many years. Do you want to tell us about your work out there and what you projects that you did out there and what it was like? Maybe how that scene out there differs to the one here in San Diego.
Yeah, it's a really great scene. It's we met a group from Ireland that had toured in, and they were talking about Chicago actors, and they called them lunchbox actors because they said they come to work with their lunchbox, and they're just professionals about it, and they do their work, and they go home. They don't have nearly as much ego. It's a very Midwestern sensibility. It's the only town I've ever been at where I would go to an audition, and a stranger would come up to me and say, I just read for this, and I'm not right for it, but you're perfect. Let me give you their information. Like,
oh, wow.
Yeah, that kind of kindness is rampant there, and they all love each other, and they just care about doing good work. I was working mainly in like the mid-sized theaters out there. I spent a good year at Timeline doing front page, and the U.S. premiere of Pittman Painters was so much fun. And Richard was booking all over the country those days. He was in at Chicago Shakes and Portland, and he was all over the place.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Have you ever go to the Steppenwolf Theater Company in Chicago?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or what would they be considered? Are they like a high level, or like are they
Their own thing?
their own thing?
Everybody wants to be Steppenwolf.
Okay.
That's the main reason why we came out here. Is there's like 5 million young theater companies in Chicago. Maybe because everybody goes, we went to school together too. We're going to be the next Steppenwolf, and I hope they all are. But like, there's so much. It's like when the Fringe Fest is going on. It's hard to get your name out there because it's like there's stuff everywhere.
Marketing at the Fringe Festival is just that is a show in itself.
Trying to take it to the streets, right?
Oh yeah, we
literally sometimes for some shows.
Gosh, we'd put posters up. We'd throw flyers at people. Or we run into someone and they'd be like, "Okay, I've gotten like 5 of your flyers. Like, please leave me alone." Like, we get all those instances, and so I really hand it to theater companies that are able to like draw crowds, and they have great shows like you guys, because it's just it's such a hard game to be in.
Thank you. It is. It's and it's hard enough without us all being kind to each other. So I like that about San Diego too. It's
it is
friendly.
nice. People are supportive. Like all these local artists I know, they go out and see their friends' shows. And it's nice. They're not just like, oh, I'm not going to see that show. Like, you got the role I wanted. It's not like that. It's a supportive environment.
It is. It's friendly, like we were saying before, and it's a small world too. It's,
absolutely.
Everybody knows each other.
And we're talking about bringing a theater company to life out here. As executive director of New Fortune, do you want to talk a little bit about the business aspect of running a theater company?
Sure.
What it's like to create one from the ground up, almost?
Yeah, the beginning of it is kind of a blur because I had to teach myself a lot of skills. Just like, because it was Poor Players, and Poor Players had been a registered nonprofit, we had to reinstate it because it had been dormant for years. And looking back, I don't know if that was the best call, because to reinstate something, you have to keep going back through every time you submit for a grant or anything like that. Everybody goes, where was your tax return from 2012, right? We weren't here. There was nothing. And you have to, I've probably filed about 500 blank tax returns in the process of it, just going like, no, we weren't here, but now we are. And trying to build a base up is a real collective endeavor. I think that the more people that you've got on your team, the better, because a lot of those things like finding contacts and asking for money is stuff that nobody really feels comfortable doing. I don't know many, and so the more you can be in it together and be like, all right, this is our goal, let's go. Then
every theater company needs more money too. Like I went to I saw all these old Globe shows last year, right? I got the 20 under 30 tickets. I got like a season past for like graduation present to go like see the summer shows. And I got this email, and I was invited to their it was like their annual members like gala, right? And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Okay. So, but I was like, I want to go. And so I went with a friend, and, we were the youngest people there, and everyone there, they were like, these like long time like donors or people that had seen the shows. And so we were feeling totally out of place. But we walked in, and we saw this presentation that Barry Edelstein, artistic director, was giving. And, we got to see the rundown of that previous season's, year, where like how much money they made, how much it cost to put on the shows. And I was shocked. I was like, oh, wow, that's a lot of money. But then it showed the cost to put on the show with, hiring all these actors and the sets and, everything. And, it doesn't like turn that much of a profit. It's just like,
no.
which is it's crazy.
And it's especially hard for a young theater company such as New Fortune because for these larger theaters where the majority of their profits come from is a subscriber base.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the majority of the seats are filled from. And New Fortune
true.
And all these other small companies, they don't have a subscriber base.
Totally.
Right,
So
you
that
can't.
makes the marketing side of it so much more difficult, I
Right.
can imagine.
They have a
Was-
set year and schedule, and so there's subscriptions every year. But for younger people, it's not always going to be set.
Right.
Yeah.
Because when you've got subscribers, they'll usually just, roll over, and that's one mailing that you send out and go, hey, do you want to see next season too? And they go, yeah. And now you've got at least half of your house filled.
Mm-hmm.
The single tickets, that's what marketing goes after mainly. And that's what you have to fight for, is getting people who are not going to be there anyway
Totally.
to go. And even then, even the most successful theater, I think it's Ashland, has a 60-40 split as far as ticket sales and donations. So they make 60% of their revenue through ticket sales and the other
Wow.
40 through donations. But almost every theater, and this is true of New Fortune too, it's a 50-50 split. And I think a lot of people go and they went, well, I bought a ticket and I did my part. And they did. But I think a lot of people don't realize that's only half of what
Right.
we need for, and
Yeah.
if there's more, then even better. But theater's expensive.
How does
Super expensive.
how does a small theater company without a subscriber base go about getting people in those seats, getting people to buy tickets?
As creatively as possible. Well, because like our first two shows, we didn't have any marketing budget at all. But because San Diego is an awesome theater community, I would go to Moxie and Ion and Diversionary and the Rep, and I'd go to all the other theaters and go, can we work trade? Because if I can put a program ad in your program right before our show, and you can put one in ours, then that's no expense to anyone except the printing you are already going to do. And I know that my ad is being seen by theater people.
Totally.
So things like that. And like you said, the Critic Circle, yay, Critic Circle, they're great at helping out too.
And they
sending
love
out.
smaller, theaters too.
They're great about triumphing the new work that happens in San Diego. So that it wouldn't happen without them either doing previews and helping get the word out there.
I got a review from David Dixon. Yeah, he's a Craig Knoll critic, and
Definitely.
he was critiquing some fringe shows a year ago because he recently got on the San Diego Theater Critics. He recently joined them, but a year ago he critiqued my fringe show, and it was in the San Diego Story website, and that was the first review I'd ever gotten from like a show I'd written, and I was just like, oh wow, this is so cool. And all my friends were just like shocked, and in the review too, it was really cool because they shouted out some of my cast members too. They were like, oh, cast standouts include this, and so the people that got shout outs were really happy, and the people that didn't were really pissed. But it was really cool to get that, and for marketing, it's always a struggle, and so it was really great to have a critic actually come to one of my shows. That was my goal. I was like, I want to write a show and produce it, and I want one critic to show up. I want one critic, and it took like a year and a half until that happened. But it was really cool when it did.
That's awesome.
That was really cool. I reached out to this local newspaper about the last two times I produced shows for the San Diego Fringe Festival. I just reached out and I was like, oh hey, producing a show. I was wondering if I could get like an article blurb, and they were really cool about it. And I was able to get blurbs for the newspapers. So like, for marketing, you just gotta like keep trying out different things to see if it sticks to get an audience there.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that we could get a little look behind the scenes of all of the work that goes into a show so far into advance of when it's even cast, when it even starts rehearsals, because all of that work is completely unsung.
Yeah.
It's well, we're lucky at New Fortune though, honestly, because it is such a team. But I hope that's interesting at all. It feels very responsible.
It's completely interesting. It's completely interesting because, like, going to see theater shows, like, nobody really thinks about, like, how was it that I was able to, like, sit in this seat, see this show, buy this ticket? Like, how did I hear about this? I heard about it from this website. Who posted that listing? Who was able to do this? How did they get the space? Like, it's crazy. You don't, like, and it's like, an audience members are like, oh, I bought a ticket. What do you mean? They want a suggested donation. Like, what is this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which, I get why people think that.
Or
Yeah,
good lord,
but
this
give money.
ticket's far too expensive.
Yeah, it's like $70.
Well, and that's something a lot of theaters do too, because they're not getting the donations that they want. So they go, oh no, we need more money. We better make the tickets more expensive. And then everybody goes, what? The tickets are more expensive?
Yeah.
I'm not going now.
Yeah.
So
Completely
it's a tough
backfires.
play.
Or you're just like, you try and get some, like famous actor from like TV or something to try and like, I don't know. You
That's
get,
another way to do it.
yeah, you get some star power in your show or something to try and attract people. So, there's always tactics, and I'm glad we were able to talk about this because it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's important for a lot of people to know how
Yeah.
much work goes into shows outside of the lights and the sound and the directing and the acting.
Yeah. Well, and if you're starting younger, you've got a benefit because everyone hasn't gone totally pro on you yet. And so you can put great things together, which I used to love to do when I was younger, is go, everybody come here and make something awesome. And because everybody's doing this for love, you don't have to charge a ton.
Right.
And so then everybody goes, I'm in, I've got $5. And then you've made a good profit for a good project.
It was so cool. Like it was so cool. Like 2 years ago when I was producing this show, because like I reached out to like everybody, like hey, do you want to act in my show? And they all said yes. And there were some really talented people like in the show I'd produced, and I was just like, I was so thankful for that. And and I feel like now maybe like if I had done the same thing, I don't think like all of those people would have responded and said yes, because like as we're getting older, there's other shows that they're being offered, or they're in college now and they're doing like paid summer shows in some productions, and so it's just it's interesting. It's like it's nice to start young because like people and you're able to get them for free sometimes, and their egos are not super inflated just yet, and not everyone's like that, but there's some people that like they go out and it's like, oh no, like I won't be able to get them anymore because they're doing such like big things. I don't know.
I know.
Yeah.
So as we're getting towards the end of our time here, do you want to close out by telling us maybe what your favorite project you've ever done has been, or favorite projects if it's too hard to pick just one?
Oh man, I have so many favorite projects. But I think I would give you my my most humbling experience was on As You Like It, Richard actually directed. And I really wanted to be Cecilia, and he cast me as Audrey. And Audrey has 17 lines, and I was so mad. And it finally got into rehearsal, and it was the most fun, just like freely fun that I've ever had. And my touchstone was amazing, and we got to dance, and we had a man with a hurdy-gurdy playing behind us, this huge bustle and a blacked-out tooth, and it was like so much fun. As you come on stage for like 2 minutes, everybody laughs, and then you leave again. It was fantastic.
And you get to chill backstage the rest of the it's
yeah,
fun.
You just chill, covered in Texas dirt, and but But no, because I was so mad going into that. That's
Oh, wow.
always one of my favorites. That I got to learn that. You know.
I think
we've been there. We've both been
too.
there.
Yeah, I was.
You know.
I got roles in shows where I was just like, oh no, why? And then I ended up loving it, and I was like, oh, this is so much fun. I played Grumio in Taming of the Shrew, and I wanted.
That's great though.
It was a great role, but I didn't know it was going to be such a great role because
we all wanted Petruchio.
Yes, I wanted I wanted Petruchio or Lucentio, and then once I started playing Grumio and the weeks went by, I was like, oh man, I have so much room to just play and just do like so many fun things, and so that was a really cool experience.
Yeah,
like that was
the only one I can think of right off the bat. I'd have to think about it more. Is the first show I did at my high school was Xanadu, the musical about the roller skating muses and all this. And in the show, there's Sonny, and then there's an older character that he meets that helps him create the roller skating rink. And I really wanted to be that old guy because he gets to do all these like Frank Sinatra numbers. And I ended up being one of the muses, but it was so much fun, because I got to roller skate all over the place, and ELO is great. I got to sing all their songs. So that was fun. It was a fun one.
That's really cool. Amanda, thank you so much for appearing on the show, and it was really great to hear about all the amazing things you've done. I was reading over that little blurb on the website, and I was like, oh wow, I'm so not qualified to be
Tell me more
interviewing
about my eyes.
And if the people listening want to see or hear or read some of your work, where can they best find that?
Oh, thank you. Right now, it is all being made available through patreon.com /AJ Schaar.
Which is AJSCHAAR.
If you can text me
Like a
the
pirate.
link, I will share that on our Facebook page and Instagram at Mainstage Mavericks, and I'll also do it on my other Facebook account. So
Man,
do
that's an honor. Thank you,
Yeah,
guys.
so if you go on there and you throw even $1 a month Amanda's way, you will get...
Oh, yes, Storybook Corner, and you will have funny little figments waiting for you at home after work in your email.
And it goes up from there. You can end up getting a copy of Kill Socrates.
Thank you, everybody, for joining.